Fantano is inarguably the biggest and one of the most influential music reviewers on YouTube. And honestly, just in general for right now. And although I don't like to hate on popular things, I honestly can't stand this man. Not only do I find him extremely annoying as a personality, but as a reviewer, there's nothing to him. It never feels like he actually explains his opinions and just describes how the music sounds rather than how he feels about it, unless it's a more negative opinion. On top of that, there's just nothing interesting about his reviews. So why am I doing a video about him? Because one, he's popular and I think this video could do well, and two, I watched Zenia's video on this and I found it really interesting and entertaining. So why not just take his idea and make it about my own opinions? But check him out, I found through that video and he seems really chill and cool. But yeah, today I'm going to be reviewing all of Fantano's 0 out of 10s. I'm honestly not doing this to be negative because I actually like a decent amount of hated things because I'm just so kind. So I went through this expecting most of the ones I hadn't heard to be enjoyable, which honestly half of them I have already heard, so you know. But re-listening to them gives me a better perspective on them. I'm also going to be doing this a little differently with the album selections and going to follow this one list of written music that lists all the reviews he gave zeros on, and other albums he covered on lists that he put below them. Along with his 0 out of 10 tier list video, I found while getting footage for this. So I get to cover a wider selection of shit. All that out of the way, I'm going to cover these alphabetically. Starting with... This is an album I never even heard of until making this video, and although I do respect it for what it's trying to do, it definitely doesn't do it well. I do like how explicitly clear it is, the lyrics are very potent, and for an album that focuses on its writing, I do have a problem with that, but it doesn't feel like much of an issue while listening to it. And that's mostly because the biggest issue with this is how the music sounds. Everything sounds like a preset, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, and I can believe that it could work, but at least everything sounds cheap, and the melodies of it are very wonky and off. Worst offender is Misogyny Drop Dead, which I had to hold in my laughter while listening to it. Playing the rock doesn't help at all as a singer, it actually makes things worse, and I can't explain what is so bad about this shitting. You just kind of have to listen to it for yourself. I do think there are a few exceptions to song's quality. I thought most of the intros had a nice atmosphere to them. Let's talk about Gender Baby had a nice fun beat to it. Patriarchy over and out is decent too. But overall, this album just doesn't work like I wish it did. 4 out of 10. Maybe a 3. I appreciate the attempt at least.
Gay people, gay people, gay people, gay people. Black, 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 black.
Nothing about Ice Earth going into this. So I did some research and found out that they used to be pretty well liked. Also, I found out the vocalist, John Schaefer, also attended the January 6th attack, which makes a lot of sense why this is so hated, because this is just a bunch of Republican nonsense. Even removing that context from this, it's so edgy that I don't know how anyone could ever take it seriously. Especially with the narration trying so hard to be intimidating with some horrible hilarity. The production on this is also just bland as shit. It just sounds like stock epic music ready for a shitty movie trailer. There really isn't much to say here because the album isn't even funny bad despite being that concept. It's starting after the first 3 minutes and it's an hour and 13 minutes long. 0 out of 10. Maybe I'll check out some of the good music, but this doesn't really make me want to.
We've been in there ain't nothing going on.
This is the first album on the list I had already heard, and I really hated it. I thought it was entertaining for like 1 minute, and I was already drained by it for the rest of it. It was such a nauseating experience for me, to the point where I could call it one of the worst albums I had ever heard. But coming back to this, I see a lot more in this than I did before. It's still very much an experience. It sounds like the musical embodiment of being off your meds, but I feel like it's so unhinged that it's kind of beautiful. This is especially thanks to Corey's vocals, which feel like they were put through a meat grinder, but a lot of the time it's very charming. This is also shown throughout the more dancey songs, with the rock stuff being a little more tame. And I find a lot of the songs kind of catchy, with some fine enough production. Not everything I enjoyed, but it's a very fun ride throughout the hour and a half length. The only exception is Forbidden Affection, which I want to give Corey the benefit of the doubt and say that it's through the eyes of a pedophile rather than him actually being one. But it feels so poorly handled and shitty sound that it sounds creepy out of the way. I wouldn't call this something I enjoy overall. A lot of the songs still have their issues despite how fun they are, good and bad. I definitely wouldn't call this one of the worst albums ever anymore. 5 out of 10.
I don't like your aura.
My aura?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got that yummy, yum, that yummy, yum, that yummy, yummy.
This is Bieber's comeback after 5 years since Purpose. And despite that, this album's not very good or interesting for a comeback. This album tends to go for a vibey lo-fi R&B sound that ends up sounding numbing and headache-inducing by the end. There's some songs that break the mold of laziness and have actual energy to them, like Come Around Me, Intentions, and Running Over. For the most part, it sounds so lazy and sloppy that I was half zoned out through it. A lot of the lyrics are extremely embarrassing, and a lot of people will point to attention for that. And although I agree that they ruined the song a little, it's even more apparent on Yummy, with his desperate attempt to be sexy. And when they're not embarrassing me, they're just so sappily nothing. There's a lot of features on this, and they're very hit or miss. There's ones I enjoy, like Quavo on Intentions, who I found very fun on it. Summer Walker makes Yummy sound not like the worst thing ever, and Kehlani saves Get Me from being bad. But Travis Scott sounds messy on Second Emotion. Post Malone and Clever sound horrible on Forever. And although it is my favorite song on the album, Lil Dicky ruins running over with his corny ass. I'm also really mad that you picked Ski Mask and Some God from being on this. This album is just dreadfully boring, and despite its qualities, I can't say this changes my perception of Bieber in any way. 3 out of 10. It's at least a better attempt at R&B than Journals was.
What do you think? Sounds like something she'd say. I like that laugh.
Stepped out of bail, I did a diddy bop. I had to tilt my hat at the city cop.
This is the only album on the list I've already heard that I refuse to listen to, almost entirely because of how problematic it is. So I'm just gonna go off memory for this. Back in 2020, Tory Lanez shot Megan Thee Stallion in the foot because he's a misogynistic piece of shit. And this whole album is just him reflecting the truth and acting egotistical. Whole thing is just so obnoxious that it ruins any replay value this could have had, which is not saying that it had any in the first place, because it sounds like shit. I don't hate Tory's other music, definitely want to call myself a fan, but at least he has some confidence in his art. But here it just seems like it's completely gone, because he's just too focused on line. None of the production is good, and he just sounds phoned in the whole time. It's not even entertainingly awful because you're just watching someone be a mess for an hour. I don't even know why I put myself through his back then. I had nothing like this video to do for it. So I would just say don't waste your time like I did. 0 out of 10.
I got my own strain. Bitch, this top shelf. I can break my wrist, baby. I don't need no help.
I'll admit that this is my very first Green Day album back when this released. I have honestly heard a good handful of their hits for that, but the only albums I checked out since are Dookie and Saviors. But coming back when he was a rapper, Machine Gun Kelly was one of the worst to ever do it. He was absolutely untalented and was extremely dull. But when he starts to pop punk in 2020, it was obvious to suit him way better. Although I haven't listened to Tickets to My Downfall since its release, I remember actually liking it. But slowly he got worse and worse in it. I didn't dislike mainstream style, but it was definitely way lazier and more annoying. As for Trippie Redd, he's honestly one of my favorite musicians. I've always been drawn to his voice and his singing, and as a rapper he's extremely talented. And even when he made some rock music, he was still great to me because of his singing abilities. But even when this album was announced, I can't say I was excited in the slightest. It just seemed doomed to fail. And listening to it, I can't say it was a surprise. It's a mix of mostly rap with some rock, and though on paper that sounds fine for Trippie, MGK going back to rapping is absolutely horrifying, and barely doing what he was decent at made it worse. And he's really bad at both things here. Kelly's vocals sound worse than they usually do. He has this weird deepness that almost sounds like an effect, and it makes everything he says sound awkward. And it's not like beyond that he's doing anything that could boost any of the song's enjoyment. Trippie is for sure better on here, with a few alright performances, but this is still easily the worst he's ever sounded. It feels like he's on autopilot on this. There's also an uncredited JID feature on here, which definitely confused me when I've heard it. And although he improves the song a little, it's very easily one of the worst songs on this. The production is nothing to help either of them. The last song I thought sounded okay until MGK came on. I did think the last song sounded okay until MGK came on due to its campfire aesthetic, but the rest of this is so fucking dull. Maybe a few decent-ish elements on the production, but I can barely be bothered to care. Overall, this album wasn't disappointing by itself, but as a huge Trippie fan, I couldn't feel more betrayed by this. 3 out of 10. Not horrible, but don't waste your half hour.
Karma's a bitch. I should've known better. Y'all fucking with that new JoJo Siwa?
Sure.
Period. Everyone is stating JoJo.
Going into this album, I knew nothing about it other than the vocalist, Chris Barnes, used to be in Cannibal Corpse, which is a pretty well-liked band. He left after some time and eventually started this band. Apparently he did what a lot of metal singers do and then put on a hard voice. And I bring this specifically up because this album is mainly hated because of his voice, which sounds like it went through hell and back. I didn't listen to any of his bands or Cannibal Corpse's music because I already have so much for his video to listen to, so the effect of his vocals is probably lost on me. But honestly, I kind of like them. They're definitely funny to listen to, and they're not intimidating at all. But I don't know, it's just like something about them that works for me. Seriously can't explain why that is. Maybe it's also because I feel a little bad, because he ruined his vocal cords to such a degree, that even if it's just a voice that he puts on, he's done it so excessively that it no longer sounds like how it's supposed to. What I understand, these are all covers of other metal songs, and as someone who doesn't listen to much of it and doesn't really feel like listening to the original songs for this, mainly because it's funny for this to be my only exposure to them, I also enjoy these songs outside of the vocals. I'm sure the original versions still managed to be way better, but because they're most likely the same arrangements, they work fine enough for me. I honestly expected to hate this going in, but I honestly had a decent amount of fun with this. Far from perfect, but it's just a silly little album for me. 6 out of 10. Probably the worst thing ever to metalheads, but as an outsider, I don't mind it.
Rain on some other shit, though. I've been all up in the club for a year. Hey, rain.
So that's in the changes segment, but Lil Dicky is one of the unfunniest artists to ever exist. For him to make a project that not only has him doing his usual shtick, but himself doing the same thing in an annoying voice sounds like hell. And after listening to this, it kind of is. It's just so uninteresting and devoid of anything actually comedic that I don't know how anyone could unironically listen to it. I guess Cocaine and F-Slow could have been enjoyable if you got rid of the corniness, but for the rest of this, it just sounds so bad. I also thought the game did serviceable enough to save How Can You Sleep, so good job for him. Besides this only being 20 minutes, it really got on my nerves. 3 out of 10, very close to a 2.
Like as a child, I was so dismissive of the baked potato till I tried that shit. Now the baked potato is my favorite kind of potato.
Woo! You know, we're Berkeley, California.
It feels so refreshing to listen to something that I already know I love for this video. Lil B is probably my favorite artist of all time. There's just a simple beauty to his music that always appealed to me. So for Fantano to give this a 0 out of 10, even as an alleged joke review, is evil. This album isn't the deepest thing ever, but it feels like one of the most potent in Lil B's genuine soul. From his lyrics to his delivery in full, it feels like one of the most down-to-earth pieces of music to exist. Lyrics are written in a way that may not make you think about life and social issues too hard, but they are written to make you feel them on a strong level. That's the beauty of Lil B's music to me. He's such a positive soul that it feels impossible to hate his music. And that attitude applies to his album the most out of his catalog that I've heard, which is a good amount, but not much because he has a lot. It evokes such strong and positive inspiring feelings through hardships and trauma. And that feels like such a hard thing to do. And on a sonical level, this album sounds amazing. It adds closer to an old school sound, and that's one of my favorite styles of Lil B. And it mixes it with cloud rap very well, leading it to be even more beautiful than it would have been otherwise. This may not be his best project, although God's Father does hold the title for my favorite album ever, but I believe this embodies the spirit of Lil B the best. 10 out of 10.
Don't let a word make you discriminate upon another human, because at the end of the day, no matter what you do, I should be happy for you. Because you're alive, you know what I mean? Like you're living life, like you're doing what you want to do, bro. Like a gay person, I shouldn't be mad at them. Who am I to say?
Beautiful people, top designer clothes.
Ed Sheeran has always been a guilty pleasure of mine. To me, he's always had a strong that appeal to me. For me, he's just a silly little guitar guy. But on this album, he decided to follow up another project he did a while ago and go through some different sounds with a bunch of different artists, barely any of it being his usual acoustic pop stuff. And how did it turn out? Honestly pretty fine, if not a little rocky. He follows more of a simple pop route, and I think those usually turn out well, but it's kind of all over the place. People with Khalid is a great opener, but other songs that follow it sound like I don't care and Way to Break My Heart don't pique my interest. One thing I definitely don't like on this album is when he tries to rap like on Take Me Back to London, 1000 Nights, and Ramadan. It just sounds so try-hard on them, and all of the features half-ass their performances. I like Ed with the melodies, I don't like Ed when he act tough. As for the other features, they're mostly okay. I love Chance and Cross Me, along with the P&B rock sample on it. And I thought Bruno Mars and Chris Stapleton did solid and blow, all the Cardi on South and the Border. But everyone else I'm pretty neutral on. There's not a lot to say about this one really, it's just a decently fun album to me. 6 out of 10.
I don't really care if you cry. On the really should've never lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. Baby, I am not afraid to die. We need more victimization.
This is the only album on this video that I did prep for, because although I already listened to both the original album and the Nostalgia Critic one, I never actually watched the movie or the review itself. So I treated both watches as re-listens for the music, even if it isn't exactly the same order. And let me say that getting to the movie was the best decision I made for this video. I already loved the album, but the movie is absolutely beautiful and haunting. And it definitely made every criticism in the Nostalgia Critic video even worse. As someone who genuinely does like his videos, this is one of the most disgusting misunderstandings of a piece of art that I've ever seen. It gets so many basic things wrong in this, which I could get into, but I don't feel like making this segment too long. And enough people have criticized this video, so you can just watch those. So basically, compare compares Roger Waters' own problems and feelings to about World War II, about him just being mopey and calling school lame. It feels horribly misguided and just shits on something so personal. It's especially bad when you realize it is meant to be a love letter to Pink Floyd for some reason. I still think there's some okay nostalgic humor, both visually and lyrically, but for the most part, it's just some of the worst criticisms I've ever seen. As for the music itself, it's just a tacky version of the original album with some horrible vocals from Doug. I don't find his usual voice annoying, but I can't stand his singing in here. And the production is just the same as the album, but way worse sounding. Not necessarily horrible, but everything surrounding it makes it unbearable. As much as I like Doug's reviews, he absolutely failed with this. 2 out of 10.
But I'm a bad liar, bad liar.
Just like with Ed Sheeran, Imagine Dragons are a guilty pleasure of mine. There's always been something about their music that attracted me, and although they have their fair share of misses, I can't help but still enjoy this stuff. And this album isn't any different. I'm gonna keep this one short because I don't really know how to review it, since it's kind of all over the place in quality and sound. You got some really great songs like Natural and Bad Liar, but then you got some pretty bad ones with Digital and Machine. And a lot of the songs in between sound stupid but have enough charm for them to be neutral on them. It's honestly kind of standard for Imagine Dragons album. I have some really strong tracks and then throw in some bad ones in there. 6 out of 10, weaker than usual, but I still liked it.
This ain't your granny station.
He was hitting lick after lick. What lick? Now I'm hitting bitch after bitch.
Nav isn't always a guilty pleasure that I always got, but once I did, he quickly became one of my favorite artists. Ignoring when he used to say the N-word in his music, which thankfully he stopped after people criticized him for it. He's genuinely one of the most talented artists of our time. His beats are almost always immaculate, and they're perfectly downbeat and chill. He's unironically one of my favorite producers, and as a rapper he's great too. Not in terms of technical ability, but his goes more on vibes than anything else, and I love how he does it, so I don't care. It's not like most of his lyrics are bad anyways. Again, outside from saying the N-word back then, and another thing I'll get to. I also love the mix of his monotonous delivery and the high pitch of his vocals. It just adds so much to its sound. And although I genuinely love him, there isn't really much to say about his album specifically that I didn't already say about him in general, which is fine. He's a simple man and he's great at what he does. As for things I can say about the album itself, I guess I can talk about the features which I all love. They all also do what they usually do, which is pretty good anyway. I particularly love Travis Scott and Champion. He gets a stronger sense of tension and height that the beat already has. I can say the same with Nav's higher tones on here. If there's one thing I do have to complain about, it's definitely the infamous racing part on Glow Up. And he just had to make it worse by saying he writes his own songs immediately after. Shame because that's one of my favorites musically. And if it wasn't for that, I honestly would have given this a 10. But as it is, it's still a 9 out of 10. It has amazing atmosphere to it.
Raggedy rat rat racks in my nut new. Got raggedy rat rat racks in my nappity sack sack sack. Feeling kinky, lip syncing to 2 shorts, freaky tails. Yeah.
Eminem isn't a bad artist overall, but he's for sure one of the most embarrassing. There's at least always an attempt in his music, but most of his recent releases have not been very good. And although Revival is not his worst, it's probably the most glaring example of this. Obviously the main problem with this album is Eminem himself. It's basically just the awfully hot coffee pot freestyle. It's stretched into an hour, and if you heard that, you basically heard this whole album. The way he raps is just so disjointed and awkward that I have no idea why he chooses to rap like this still. He's improved on it, but it's still so confusing. It doesn't help that his vocals sound super straight and scratchy to the point where he sounds like he needs cough medicine. Lyrically, it's either really badly written stuff about himself, really badly written political statements that are meant to be progressive but sound fake, and really badly written made up stories. About that second part, it's really funny how this album is supposed to be left-leaning, but it sounds Republican as hell. The production either sounds so dull and uninspiring while trying to make it sound inspiring, or very bad attempts at trying to sound hard. And the use of samples on this are very bad. I enjoy the production on River and Framed, but that's about it. For the features, they all sound like background noise. I guess Ed Sheeran was okay on River, and same with half of Kalani on Nowhere Fast. I don't really care that much though. The album is just a failure on almost every front, and the parts that aren't are still far from tolerable. 2 out of 10, better than Kamikaze at least.
That's an awfully hot coffee pot. Should I drop it on Donald Trump? Probably not.
All I knew about this going in was that the lead singer tweeted out some of the most heinous shit imaginable the same year this album released. So I was expecting the worst just because of that. And although I certainly wouldn't call it a disaster, I can't say it was a good album. Even calling it bad feels like it's doing too much because it's so inoffensive. There isn't much that I necessarily hate about the music, but listening to it felt so numbing. It's just a huge nothing of an album. I feel like this is more hated because of the controversy at the time than the actual music itself. But honestly, that's fair enough for this release, since there isn't much to gain from this. 4 out of 10.
I heard that you a pedophile, you touch little boys and girls.
Although I definitely understand the hate for this album, as it's very out there and experimental in a confusing way, I genuinely think this is a great album. Cudi's mental state was at an all-time low here, and the sound of this is so ominous and impressive in such an interesting way. The underdevelopment of it actually adds to the experience in Cudi's mind state. It feels very deliberate and makes the album feel haunting. There's a lot of great riffs on here that adds to the atmosphere of it too. My only issue is the Beavis and Butthead skits that are put at the end of some songs. They're not funny and take away from the mood from the album. But ignoring that, I found this to be a very heavy and excellent sounding piece. 9 out of 10.
Remember that lady that went live on Facebook? She got pulled over by the police and they shot her husband? Yeah.
I got muscles like Superman trainer.
Chance the Rapper used to be one of the most praised rappers of the 2010s until he released this album, which he quickly became one of the most hated. It is easily one of the worst decisions the general consensus made to an artist. The soul of this album is just pure happiness and fun, and although that doesn't exempt it from any criticism, it means it's perfect. It definitely makes it hard to genuinely hate this album. Even in the downer songs like We Go High and Rue, it still has this glimpse of hope. The album is just one huge wedding vow to Chance's wife, and it's just so genuine and pure. Even if I hated how this sounded, I couldn't completely hate it because of the joy of Chance here, and I couldn't take that away from him. And luckily the album does sound genuinely great, being a mostly bouncy and fun ride. And the slower stuff is still very good. The features definitely help this album too, with everyone at least giving a decent performance. Even Shawn Mendes, as smart as his heart was, managed to be good on Ballin' Flossing. Personal favorites being Lil Durk and Nicki Minaj on Slide Around, May and TYO and DaBaby on Hot Shower, Gucci Mane on Big Fish, and Taylor Bennett on Rue. Overall, this is just one of the happiest albums ever put out. And even though Chance and his wife ended up divorcing, I think this album still shines just as strong. 9 out of 10.
Ooh, I love my wife. I love my wife. Let's go ride a bike with my wife.
Pop the trunk, I open up, I sold my soul a good price, out of sight.
I actually used to agree with people on this album. Thought it was absolutely lazy and mind-numbing. And honestly, part of me still sees it that way, but in a way that actually adds to the album's sound. It feels like its goal is just to be completely out of its mind, whether in a relaxing or different way, and it succeeds in that. I think especially for the laid-back songs, he really does sound drugged out of his mind. I think all of the features do a really good job in here. For the Betrayed remix, I'm not a Yo Gotti fan, but he flowed amazingly on it. Very Sharp turned Shine Hunter into their own song, and if it was actually labeled as theirs, with a Lil Xan feature, it would be one of their best. Charlotte XCX is on here for whatever reason, but she's pretty good on Moonlight, and everyone else is pretty solid for their songs. If there is one issue I do have, is that some of the lyrics are kind of stupid. I obviously didn't go into this expecting anything great, just like look at the fucking cover. But a few of these kind of confuse me. Betrayed is a song about like, how much he doesn't like being addicted, but the song right after it starts off with him saying, which kind of takes away from the song. Also, I think him trying to turn not cheating in your homework. Although I wouldn't call this a masterpiece, it is surprisingly really fun and re-listen. 8 out of 10. Some issues, but I really liked it. 2. The boring music.
Standing on the line I was given.
Dance Monkey is one of the worst songs ever. At least out of stuff that is popular. So it's absolutely draining this album for this challenge. And for the most part, it was exactly what I expected. Obviously her voice is the main issue here, just extremely draining in every possible way, and it's not like she can seem to make it more bearable. And neither is most of the production, which sounds like it was made in a lab to sound as annoying and empty as possible. Mostly just sounds so devoid of life. The more emotional songs fare better than the quote-unquote fun ones, but they give me nothing to work with other than being actively annoying. Except for Just a Mess, that one's actually kind of catchy and enjoyable. But everything else I can't stand. There's nothing else I can really say. Despite it being really annoying, I felt insanely bored by it. And that's probably the worst kind of music out there. 2 out of 10.
5 little chuddies jumping on the bed. One fell off and bumped his head.
I haven't listened to any of their other stuff, but apparently this is popular than usual for them. And although I feel like that usually entails for a worse sound from music, I'm still a fan of pop music, so it doesn't bother me as much as others. And that applies to this album as well. I don't have anything to say about this, really. I just think it's incredibly simple. It's just fun enough pop rock, and doesn't really do anything above that. But the songs are very solid, so I don't have any problem with that. 7 out of 10. This is sure as fuck.
Am I really dead? Well, if you weren't dead, would you feel nothing when I do this? Ah, son of a bitch! You know what? That's right. It takes a day. My bad. Sorry.
Not as people, though. They're pretty evil. Fuck. And that's all the albums. That's all of them. As much as I don't like Fantano, I really hated some of these albums here. I did feel like this was a fun challenge. It did get me to look at some of these albums in a different way, whether it be more positive or negative, and just like try to like understand why, and like try even with the ones I love, I try to understand like why they're so bad. A couple of them I didn't really understand, but like still. So there's one thing I can give Fantano for, it's that like I don't know, like he cut his hair. He cut his really bad haircut, I guess. I don't fucking know. I'm going to script it. I didn't write the script for then. But yeah, if you like the video, subscribe and click the like button. And if you disagree with me, no, you don't.